This week we will be learning about the mystery of history. And we're going to be studying about the things we need to know about why we study history and how we study history. So let's get started. First of all, we're going to start with some vocabulary. History is the written study of the past. Prior to having writing, we call that prehistory. So if we have writing, the invention of writing is what started the ability to have written history. So that is history, the written study of the past. A historian is a person who studies the past, studies history. An artifact is evidence from the past. Oral history is the passing down of history through word of mouth, through generations, through people. Prehistory is history that occurred before writing was invented. Chronology is the order in which events happened. Timeline is a graphic representation used to arrange the dates of historical events. An archaeologist is a person who studies the past by using artifacts. Primary sources are first-hand evidence that an event happened or first-hand evidence of an event. Secondary sources are accounts of the past created or explained by people sometime after the event is over. An eyewitness is a person who actually witnessed or saw the event with their own eyes. Perspective is the way that a person looks at something, the way that a person views a certain topic. And a reliable source is a source of information that is true. It's factual. It's based on evidence. What is history? History is a written account of the past. It is a study of the past. We study the past to find out what happened and what does that mean to us today. Before there was writing, there was no real accounting for what happened in history. So we call that time before written history, we call that prehistory. We learn about the past by studying clues that were left behind. Archaeologists are scientists who examine evidence left behind from people from the past, and they make inferences or educated guesses about how people lived. Artifacts are objects left behind by someone in the past, and these objects tell a story about the past. Common artifacts are coins, pottery, arrowheads, jewelry, etc. Why do we study history? Well, we study about history, we study about people of the past, and we learn about their mistakes. All people make mistakes. We also learn from their successes, because that's how we actually do things better, is by learning from others. By learning from the past, we learn about ourselves too. We can ask ourselves important questions. What would I do in that situation? What would we as a society or a community do if that happened today? By learning about history, we can learn how to be better people. We can learn to be a better society. We can learn what we should do and what we shouldn't do. Being a responsible citizen means studying and understanding our history. Learning about history helps us make decisions. It helps shape who we are and how we act. Studying history gives us a glimpse or a sight or a look into what life was like in the past. It helps us to be critical thinkers and to analyze information effectively. Studying history shows us the similarities and differences of people throughout time. It helps us understand other cultures and other types of people. It makes us more connected in the world and to our own culture. It can inspire us. It can give us new interests. It connects us with the past and makes us think about the future. It can help us develop our own character traits and morals. And it can inspire us to change the world and be a change maker, to fix what's wrong, if you will. Now, how do we study history? Historians study history much like a detective would study a crime scene. A historian would ask questions and find answers. A historian conducts interviews with people like eyewitnesses who viewed or saw the event. They look for facts and evidence, like artifacts. They analyze evidence and data to draw conclusions or make educated guesses about what is going on. A historian uses credible sources. That means reliable or real, or things that are true and factual and believable. They know the difference between a primary source and a secondary source. They also understand point of view, the way someone looks at something, bias when we think about something in a way that maybe is unfair to the topic or that kind of makes us think about the topic in a certain way, but not see the whole picture. And perspective, the way that a person views a topic, incident, or idea. How to re-record history? Well, we already talked about how history is a written record of the past. And prior to having writing, we had prehistory, what we did before there was writing. It's essential either way to keep a record of history and make sure that it's accurate or correct. We document events by keeping written records and documenting eyewitness accounts, people that were there and viewed the event or were there at the event. We use timelines to arrange the dates in history. Timelines are a graphic organizer of the dates in history, important events. Chronology is the order in which events occur. So we often keep track of chronology in history, but you could actually outline the chronology of your day. Everything from waking up in the morning, hitting snooze, waking up again after snooze goes off, getting up, using the restroom, brushing our teeth, getting ready, going to school. We could put the things that we do in a day in order. That would be chronology. Timelines use certain letters to determine where on the timeline it took place. You will often see BC and AD. You will also often see BCE or CE. BC means before Christ. So on a timeline that uses BC and AD, it uses the birth and the existence of Jesus in the Christian religion to document what came before or after his life. Before Christ means that it happened before Jesus was on our planet. And after death, which many people think that's what that means, it actually means I can't even say it, Anno Domini, which means in the year of our Lord. So BC means before Christ, and AD means after Christ's life. In modern timelines and calendars that are non-Christian, we use BCE, which means the same thing, but it means before the Common Era, and CE, which means the Common Era or the current era. So they connect. BC has been replaced with BCE in non-Christian timelines and historical books and knowledge. And then AD has been replaced by CE. It means the same thing, but it's in a non-Christian way. Historical maps are used to make sense of history. We often see historical maps, and they change from throughout the time. Primary and secondary sources are used to make sense of history as well. Let's take a closer look at primary and secondary sources. Primary sources are the first-hand evidence from an event. Things like diary entries of a person who was living through the event, letters that were written during the event, documents that are found that existed at the time of the event, photographs that were taken during the event, artifacts from the time of the event, and eyewitness accounts, people that are interviewed that were there during the time of the event. Then we have secondary sources. Secondary sources are they're more removed from the actual event, and they are second-hand evidence from an event. Secondary sources are accounts explained by people later after the event occurred. So these would be examples of, like, for instance, textbooks. A textbook can explain what happened during the Revolutionary War, but no one that was writing the textbook was alive during the Revolutionary War. So therefore, it would be a secondary source. A newspaper article is written by a person who wasn't actually at the event, and so that would be a secondary source. Unless the newspaper article were written by someone who was at the event, then it could be considered an eyewitness account, and it changes slightly. A documentary about the Revolutionary War could be a television show about what happened during the Revolutionary War, but no one producing that show was actually alive during the Revolutionary War, so it would be a secondary source. Primary sources are more reliable than secondary source. We're going to take a closer look. In class, and if you're watching this video on your own, you can take a moment and watch the videos along the way that will go deeper into these areas. Let's take another look at primary versus secondary sources. So primary is a piece of evidence created by someone at the time of the event, like letters, diaries, government records, autobiographies. Remember, auto means self. So this is when a person writes a story about their life is an autobiography. An artifact from the event, or if they're, I don't know why computer software is on this list, you can ignore that. Secondary sources, information created by someone who was not present at the event after it happened. So examples of that would be newspaper articles, textbooks, biographies. Biography, bio means life, and graphy means to write about, so it's to write about someone's life. That's not you. Encyclopedias, dictionaries, atlases, and there are more videos that you can watch to make more sense of primary and secondary sources. This is exceptionally important. Evaluating sources is a part of a historian's job, and it's actually all of our job. It has become very, very important to evaluate the sources. Since the internet was invented, we have an explosion of information. We have access to so much information that you would think that we would know more than ever. But in actuality, it's actually convoluted things. It has messed things up and it has made things more complicated. Because anything on the internet, just because it's on the internet, does not mean that it's true. People post things on the internet for lots of different reasons. And it's important for someone who is studying the facts, studying science, or studying history, that they actually get to the truth. So it is very important to evaluate the resources and the sources that you are looking at when you're studying history, and just for real everyday life. Let's take a look, because the truth matters. When we are determining if a source is reliable or not, reliable means that it's true. It is factual. The content has been checked and it is valid. It is not made up. It is not pretend. It is not fake news. Reliable means that you can count on it to be real. So when we're looking at a source, we ask ourselves the following questions. What is the source? Is it a blog? Is it an academic journal? Is it a textbook? Is it Wikipedia? Is it encyclopedia? Is it YouTube? Is it TikTok? We have to look at what the source is to determine first whether that has a chance of being very reliable or maybe questionable. We also ask ourselves who created the source. Who is the author of the source, and what do we know about them? Then we ask, is the author credible? Meaning, are they believable? Do they know what they're talking about? Are they an expert? Should they be trusted, or might they be hiding something? Does the source list references? A good source of information on the internet will always list references. It will cite where they got the information, because other people have researched things in history. And so it's important to actually put those as references so that you can go back and check. Again, something that someone says might not be true, but if it has references and you can go check those references, then it might be more reliable. Who is the author speaking to? What is the author's purpose? That's something we need to look at. Has the source been reviewed for accuracy? Many times when you're looking at a journal, an academic journal, it's been looked at by lots of different people in the same field. So if it's an article about the coronavirus, it will be reviewed by lots of different scientists and doctors that have experience with the coronavirus to ensure that it's accurate information that's being put out there. If it doesn't have reviews, if people haven't looked at it like scientists and doctors, then an article about the coronavirus by just some person that decided they were going to write about the coronavirus should be less reliable. It could be less reliable, so you want to watch that. How recent is the source, and does that matter? In some cases, when you're looking at something and you're researching something, then you're looking for a source that's been recent, something very recent. So if we were looking for something on the coronavirus, we would want it the most recent as possible, because we're learning new things about the virus every single day. So that means that something that's more relevant would be closer to today's date when we're researching. But if you're looking at something from, for instance, the Revolutionary War, something that was written during the Revolutionary War might actually be much more accurate than something that's written about the Revolutionary War now. So in some cases it matters, and in some cases it doesn't. It depends on what you're researching. What is the purpose of the source? Is it trying to inform you and give you facts, or is it trying to persuade you to believe something, to change your mind? Is it trying to influence you? Those are important questions to ask. Does the writing have strong opinions or feelings? When you read an article, if it's showing really strong opinions and really strong feelings, it may be less reliable because the person writing it shouldn't be about emotions and shouldn't be about feelings and opinions. It should only be about facts. And facts really don't have that much emotion and that many feelings involved. It's facts. In the article or website, is it sponsored by a company? So for instance, if you're reading an article about a certain disease and it's talking all about the disease and some ideas for a cure or some ideas about managing that disease, is it sponsored by a company that perhaps makes medicine? If it is, then you shouldn't really trust that article to be absolutely accurate. Because why? Because the article has something in it. There's a hidden agenda. They may want to sell medicine from that company who wrote that article. So you really need to look and see if something is sponsored by a certain company, because if it is, maybe there's a reason they want you to think a certain way or think a certain thing. Why does this all matter? Well, it matters because it's important to get to the truth. In science and in history, it is important to have the truth. Not opinion, not something somebody wants you to believe, but actual facts. And to find facts takes a lot of detective work. It's important work. You want the information to be true. Okay, we skipped over a few videos, but please, if you are in class or if you are assigned for homework, you can go back and watch several of the videos that were in this slideshow. There's also practice at the end that you will do in class, but you can also do on your own if you're watching this video solo. There is a practice with a word bank. There is practice without a word bank. Do you know your definitions? Are you ready for the quiz? In class, we will be going over several different examples of primary and secondary sources, and you will need to match them. For instance, is the Diary of Anne Frank, is that a primary source or a secondary source? That is something that you'll need to know. It was written during the time of World War II by a person who was there for the event. It would therefore be a primary source. We will go over these in class, and feel free to go over them on your own. We have some quiz questions. If you're ready for these quiz questions, then you should be able to answer them while you're going through this video. And we may very well in class do a crime scene investigation. If we are in person, we may do an in-person activity. If we are online virtually, we may do an online activity in class. And that is all for the mysteries of history. Make sure that you go through and you know your vocabulary, that you can identify primary and secondary sources, that you go at the end of the slide and are able to answer all of the practice questions to be ready for that quiz. See you in class.